Hello, my name is John Peace with the Rural Route Review. I'm here with my co-host again, Heather Riggs Moses. Heather, you want to introduce yourself and tell the viewers?
Hi, my name is Heather Moses, and I am born and bred Southwest Virginia girl and happy to be here.
Great. And our special guest today is if you're a local here in Southwest Virginia, you probably already know him. Of course, we've got viewers outside the state. His name's Doug Mullins. Doug, you want to introduce yourself and your title and your job?
Hey, John, Heather, thanks for having me on. My name is Doug Mullins. I'm the Commissioner of the Revenue here in Wise County. And as we were just discussing, that is a kind of a neat name for the property assessor in each locality. I'm a constitutional officer, one of five that exists in the localities, created by, as the term would imply, the Constitution of Virginia. There's the sheriff, the clerk of courts, the treasurer, the commissioner of revenue, and the Commonwealth attorney. So there are five of us. We enjoy our own independence and our own jurisdiction as it's given by the Constitution and the Code of Virginia. So I've been here in this office for 20 years, actually a little bit beyond that. It's amazing to even say that. I was on the board of supervisors prior to this for about 5 years. And during that time in my former life, I was a school teacher, public educator in three different school systems, and actually found my way over to local government by way of a challenge by some students in my Appalachian Studies class. So
Wow. Now,
that's
Doug, you left out a little bit of football coaching.
I did. I was a coach for many years, multiple sports, football being my primary. But gosh, back in the day, you know how it is. You got to get a job, and so if they ask you if you know how to coach wrestling and tennis, you say absolutely, and
Yeah, yeah.
learned how to do that, and had a great time in both those sports. So yeah, so
Well, well,
like
Doug,
I said,
I
in a
kind of
different life.
I was going to start out this. One thing I wanted to ask you exactly what your office does. And we kind of laugh when you were talking about Commissioner Revenue because Virginia has a wonderful name for your office, Commissioner Revenue, very dignified. And before this show, I did a little research, and most of the country calls them property assessors. There's a few states like Texas. You're the tax assessor.
But yeah,
What? I mean, that's a tough name. But anyway, I'll let you, because there's probably people, then viewers here that probably pay taxes for decades that really don't know how the local system works.
yeah, and
Let's talk
that's
about
a
your
good
office for a second.
That's a good point. As I stated earlier, we're entirely separate from the administrative offices, which would include obviously administration and all the departments under it and the board of supervisors. So the things that we do are mandated by the Code of Virginia and the Constitution of Virginia. A lot of people, you will hear them say things that would imply that we're empowered to enact certain policies that would that may not be very popular. I don't know if a lot of people realize this, but we live in a Dillon rule state in a commonwealth. So that basically means the localities in the Commonwealth of Virginia can only do what the ladies and gentlemen in the General Assembly in Richmond allow them to do. And there's just simply put, in the Code of Virginia, you see two words all the time, and those words are may and shall. May gives the localities an option only because they're given an option by the General Assembly. Shall, there is no option. That means that in the locality, if you're an elected position, you're a constitutional officer or on the board of supervisors or whatever, and the code says you shall do this, then you shall. You shall not decide whether or not you want to do it. You will do it, and that's state law. Yeah, and back to your point, I think that the best way to explain the origin of the name that we have, and I agree, I like the name a whole lot better than the alternative. Um, um, we're the beginning of the revenue chain. So we're the commissioner of the revenue. So through property assessments and through reports that are given a lot of our information actually comes from self-reporting by companies that by code will submit 7 and they give us their values. The other thing is, like, for instance, on the personal property side, I know I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but we get values to assess vehicles from national publications like JD Power.
Mhm.
And so we're just putting down the numbers that are given to us. And the same goes for real estate assessments that we do. We take the sales that we see and it determines the values that we put on properties. So, to answer your question, we assess real estate properties, we assess personal properties, we assess some public service corporations. The big ones go through a state corporation commission. And we also do what I like to think is really good public service things for our taxpayers. We assist citizens with income tax returns, both state and federal. The
Wow. Okay. I
code
did
the
not know that.
code the code doesn't say anything about us doing federal returns, but we will do those as well for our taxpayers. And also, we're able to help senior and disability individuals in our communities, in our county, and also veterans with tax exemptions. So there's some good things along with the perceived not so good things, but we want to straighten up that perception maybe as we go along.
Well, I'm going to hand the ball over here to Heather because she has the question of the day that's been quite a topic on social media, the local papers,
I
and
got
stuff.
you.
Heather, go ahead.
Well, I also hold a real estate license in the state of Virginia, and we have seen all kinds of posts recently on Facebook, and I've had phone calls. And Doug's office was kind enough to send out a notice to the public about assessed value increase, which obviously, Doug's just doing his job. The Board of Supervisors votes for how often they want these assessments done. And obviously, Doug has to do what the Board of Supervisors says. But I also, in discussing with folks, this whole new tax, I know a lot of people were appreciative. They were kind of stunned, but they were also appreciative that they got a letter and, that the letter explained to them what was going on and, gave them their rights. They could a right to appeal and so forth. So, and a lot of folks also commented, "Oh, I've lived here all my life and I've never gotten a letter like that before." So I thought that it was really good that your office took the preemptive step to kind of put that out there and let folks know, "Hey, this is what's going to happen, and this is why."
Doug, this would be a good time. How does a general reassessment happen? And what,
So,
yeah, the
yeah,
mechanisms of it. Yeah.
what Heather said is exactly the case. And getting back to the may and shall language that we see in the Code of Virginia. So this is a shall law that was created years ago by the General Assembly that says each locality shall conduct a general reassessment. So if you're elected commissioner of the revenue, doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter who's sitting in this seat in this office, they will conduct a general reassessment. Now, I will say this: we are the only office west of Roanoke that conducts an in-house general reassessment. That is to say, my staff and this, I've had the same assessors for over 20 years, are actually the ones who have been engaged in this reassessment process. This is their sixth reassessment. So it's not by any means the first rodeo. And to give you a little bit of history on it, when I first came into office in '02 in a special election, Wise County was winding up its general reassessment. And it used an outside contractor, which a lot of localities do, Wingate appraisers. So I'm walking around trying to figure which way the sky is in this office, just being elected and trying to determine what contribution I'm going to make. When I go to my staff and I said, why can't we do what was just done by the contractor? And one of them said, you don't want to have anything to do with that because once the contractor leaves, then the commissioner can say, I had nothing to do with it. It was on them. And I said, well, I don't know. Let's talk about it and think about it.
Now, quick question: how much did that contractor cost the county
Yeah, and
taxpayers?
so that is a great question. That's exactly, John, where I was headed next. We were actually asked by the Board of Supervisors this year. And you know what? Rightly so. I think we should always check and see if we're the best bargain for the taxpaying citizens. We were asked to do some research to determine what kind of cost there would be if we went back to a general contractor. And administration agreed with our numbers. We're saving Wise County taxpayers approximately $300,000 every reassessment cycle by doing it in house. So the Code of Virginia, I think it's 58.1, 3200, somewhere in that area, basically says that you will conduct a countywide general reassessment. And as Heather pointed out, the board has discretion, the governing body in the county has discretion to determine what that cycle will be. We're on a 4-year cycle. And we're on that cycle. We moved from a 6-year cycle because of the impact of public service. And that's a whole different story, would probably take a whole different episode, but maybe we can allude to it. So that's what the deal is. We conduct these reassessments, and it is according to state law, um, we are to derive 100% fair market value.
Okay.
And so that is based upon sales that happen in certain neighborhoods, as they say, location, location, location. And if a property like mine is selling for X amount and we only have you taxed at 30% less than that after a 4-year cycle, then we have to raise that property value up to what like properties are being assessed at. I'll give you just an example. I've had people come in, and the first thing they want to say is because there's certainly this drawn correlation between our assessment and the value and the tax levy that they pay. And as Heather said earlier, that's determined by the tax rate. And I realize they say, well, Doug, your assessment is used times the tax rate. I get that. They'll come in, they'll say, you raised my property $30,000. A guy came in the other day. You raised my property $30,000. I said, well, mine got raised 73,000.
Yeah.
Because of the value, the sales, that the market has been so hot over the last 4 years. We started this process in August of 2024, totally independent of anything going on in Wise County's budget. We're mandated to go out there and put 100% fair market value on properties. So that's what we did. Just so happened the conclusion of our reassessment coincides with, unfortunately, a budget situation that board and administration is facing. And so I immediately get to be a part of that. And it shouldn't be the case. I will say this, the last thing. Ideally, and this is not an attempt to cover my backside, I'm just trying to be transparent. Ideally, the way this thing's supposed to work out, that paper you're talking about, Heather, that we sent out, you see on there an effective tax rate of 55 cents. The way this thing's supposed to work out is that once the reassessment has concluded, the rate is adjusted so that no levy increase should be realized or could be realized in the locality. So you can see 55 cents on that paper. Technically, the rate right now, after the general reassessment, which was a 35% across the board increase, is at 55 cents, which means you shouldn't have to pay any more. So the board's deciding now between that 55 cents and where it will rest in terms of the final tax rate.
Well, Doug, you made the statement. Someone came in and said, you raised my
Yeah.
assessment. But now, Heather, and I'm going to turn this over to Heather, she's in the industry. The market actually sets the assessment. And Heather, I'll give you a little bit of time here to talk about what you've seen in the market, real estate, and in
Well,
lifetime.
it now I've not been in real estate for a lifetime, but the few years that I've been doing this, it's been all over the place since COVID. So Doug is completely right about that. The median price of a home in each county is different. Um, the median price for a home in Wise County as of 12/25 this year is around $160,000. Now, it can be as much as $183,000. It depends on what town. Your average list price is different in Appalachia than it's going to be in Wise. And so that what struck me going through the numbers for our local counties, because the median price in Lee County is 149 all the way up to 183, and it's up 8.9% from last year. Scott County's median list price is 165 to 170. That's up 5.4%. Um, Washington County's median home value is 248 to 249,000, which is only a 0.5% increase from 2024, but their median sale price is 328 to 329,000, which is a year-to-year increase of 15%. The price for a new build per square feet can be anywhere from $155 a square foot to $300 a square foot. But if you turn around and go to sell that house, I'd like to see you get $300 a square foot out of it. Now, you might get that from somebody that's wanting to move from somewhere expensive, New York, California, and they come down here and think that's a steal. But it just depends. So it's typically cheaper to buy in this area, but more expensive to build.
Well,
Question: How is our supply versus demand on a middle class house, a workforce house?
Now, in Wise County, a home will sit on the market from anywhere from 90 to 98 days. If you go to Washington County, it's about 38 days. So the markets are completely different. In Washington County versus our smaller Wisely, Scott, it's completely different markets, completely different average list price, completely different number of days on the market. So, that's one reason, honestly, why I decided to work out of Washington County originally was because their real estate market moves so much faster.
Faster, yeah.
well, it's probably also you hit on a point of duration on the market, and maybe in 25 that compared to Washington County and some of the other counties, the Wise County didn't have quite as high of percentage increase. If you look at these things, if you were in that real hot bubble, the hottest time for the sales leading up to 24, you experienced an incredible average increase across the board. Washington County, we increased 35%. Washington County increased 67%.
Wow.
And you look at some of these other counties, Tazewell County in last year, I think they finalized theirs. They were around 22%. Dickinson County 36%, Lee 46, Russell 50, Smith County 50%, and City of Bristol 50.
Wow.
So all around us, and I would suggest too that some of that is due to the cycle. Most of those, not all of them, but most of them are on a 6-year cycle,
Okay.
which means that over time, that value, that assessment, county assessment versus the selling price it has gotten further apart and thus dropped in terms of
So
sales.
so basically, like if you take like Dixon County, what'd you say, 30-some percent?
Dickinson was, I think 36%, right around
Okay.
where we
Okay.
are.
So if their last reassessment was 6 years ago, you're only
Yeah.
looking at 6% per year. And
Yeah.
that don't sound so bad.
Right.
6% per year. Instead of getting hit now, you get hit with 36%
Right. And
all at once.
right.
Yeah.
That's the reason that, there was some discussion. The board had inquired, and I talked to them a little bit about reducing that cycle even on down. You don't know exactly what the market's going to do. That has a lot to do with public service as well. So, like I said, that's another story that we could talk about. So at the end of the day, you have a situation where your initial question was supply and demand drives in capitalism. That's the fundamental concepts. What kind of demand is there on housing? I think we see nationwide there's shortages of housing. And I think here in this area there is a limited market, and you alluded to something that is so very important in the values that we've been seeing, and that is we've had a lot of interest over the last 4 to 5 years from people outside this area coming in and buying properties, coming from areas where a four or $500,000 home may be average. They get here, and a home that I have assessed at 205,000 is put on the market and sold for 395. And all of a sudden, I got to I'm told by General Assembly, 100% fair market value, young man. You put it on there, and those sales is what drives that.
I mean, of course, that's great for the person selling. I mean,
Absolutely.
seriously, we all want our neighbors to do the best they can. Hey, I'll ask both of you. I'll start out with Heather. Okay. Of course, Heather and I live in Big Stone. I never thought I'd see in my lifetime Airbnbs in Big Stone Gap. I just didn't. And Heather, you'll know maybe some facts and figures on it. I mean, have you seen rental properties really go up in value because of the demand and people buying them and just to turn around and do an Airbnb and rent them?
Now, the Airbnb thing in the Big Stone area is that also surprised me. If I was going to do houses to rent, I would rent them to residents just personally because I don't see profiting that much from an Airbnb. I know we have a couple of them, and I haven't noticed them being that busy, to be honest with you. And there is such a lack of rental properties in Wiles County as a whole, not just Big Stone Gap. People ask me all the time to look for rental properties, and there's just not enough of them. And the ones that are on the market, so many of them are falling down and in desperate need of help. It's just it's kind of wild to see because we do have a housing shortage, which I've read, that they say in the future we're going to be in 10 years it's going to be the exact opposite. But during COVID, even though there might have been real estate markets slow down in a lot of major big city areas, Northeast Tennessee and Southwest Virginia didn't see that. Because even during that time, like Doug said earlier, you have people that were trying to flee those cities to come to more rural places to live. So it didn't really affect us as it did like metropolitan areas like Atlanta and Cincinnati and Richmond. And
Yeah.
there was a lot of people that wanted to get out of the city and come to a more rural area. So our market kind of held steady and even grew during that time compared to others that may have suffered.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because I have neighbors in Powell Valley that are a lot of them were those baby boomers that moved out for employment and retired and moved back. And a lot of them were selling that house. Got one neighbor down the road that sold that house in Dearborn, Michigan, because he's a retired Ford Motor Company worker, factory worker, selling that house for $500,000. And comes back, has a good retirement, moving back to his old home stomping grounds. And so buying a house down here for $350,000, he's thinking he's getting a steal. And and on the nice houses we got. And of course, I'm sitting here going, "Man, I never thought you could sell that house for 350,000." And I'm glad
Get
for the
upset
yeah,
about that.
yeah.
Um, and I'll tell you why. In 2022 and 2023, every single client that I had in the Washington County area that wanted to buy a home had to get into a bidding war because there would be 5, 6 offers, if not more, on the table and in quick succession. And if you're coming at that from a first time home buyer or even a second time home buyer and you're straight financed, and somebody comes in from up north that's got a retirement account and just sold their home and got a whole bunch of cash, they're going to
Got
win
their
every
market
time.
price. Got their
Yeah,
market price up
right.
there.
Exactly.
And people get upset because they'll say, well, I'm not paying $350,000 for that house when I know that house isn't worth more than $250,000. But when you got XYZ from New York City coming down here, and he's thinking that house in my neighborhood would be $600,000. I'll gladly give you 350, not have to compete with any of these
And they're
finance.
still pocketing 150,000
Yeah,
from their original
yeah.
home sale. Yeah,
Yeah, the
Doug can
deal
talk
is
about.
the deal is incredible, and welcome to the world of Zillow and Realtor.com. So what you have, I tell people this all the time. We're not talking about all 100% a market that is um, trying to attract local buyers. As a matter of fact, just the opposite. Stick that home on Zillow if you want to, or realtor.com. And normally, lots of times, realtor.com and Heather will be involved in that, but it'll show you how those prices, like you just explained, people will say around here, well, it's not worth it. Well, I beg to differ. It just became worth it because you
My
market.
broker always says a house is only worth what someone is willing to pay for it.
There it is.
That's it.
There it is. That is, and so at the end of the day, it captures what what we're faced with when the Department of Taxation and says that 100% fair market value is what you'll get on these places, and we have hundreds of sales. I can't believe this was said the other day. The taxpayers literally said there have been no sales. I guess they were aggravated and agitated and trying to drive their point. There have been no sales in Wise County. I don't even know where you're coming up. We have hundreds of sales in this 18-month period. As a matter of fact, I would suggest to you, and I've even heard board members say it. I've seen it, sight unseen. There have been properties purchased, and so that's the case. Maybe that's not that's not all of it, but it certainly affects that 100% fair market value concept.
Doug, Heather, I promised I'd keep y'all just about 30 minutes. Doug, I want you to wrap up about where people can contact you, the appeals process, because we know when you're assessing so many properties,
Yeah.
you know, there's an appeals process for a reason.
And please know that my staff and I want to get your assessment correct. We don't come in the homes, we do a general reassessment. So the bottom line is if there's an error that you need to tell us, call us, come in, talk to us. We're the first line of the appeals process, is the assessors who actually went out and assessed your property. And then if we've made an error, we absolutely will correct it. I want to get it right. If we need more information, we want to get it right. After us, it's kind of, I don't know, we had in the last 2 or 3 reassessment cycles where we were flat, no increases. We had minimal inquiries. The Board of Equalization in the last 2 cycles had 0 appeals. It'll change this time, I can assure you. But the Board of Equalization is next, and then the circuit court.
Okay.
You can jump directly to wherever you want to go, but you can't come back down. So we want you to call us. We want to get it right. If you think we have it incorrect, we'll conclude our appeals process toward the end of February, and then the Board of Equalization will sit. And then, like I said, you can go to the circuit court if you.
No, nobody likes paying more taxes, property taxes and stuff. So I urge everybody, contact their board of supervisors, talk about the rate. The rate is what's going to determine your bill. And then also, if you think there's been a problem with your reassessment, call Mr. Doug Mullins, Commissioner of
Absolutely.
Revenue. And
Absolutely.
Heather, appreciate your time. Any final remarks, Heather?
Yes, I do. I want to ask Doug because I know that he and I have discussed this before, and so have you and I, about the option the Board of Supervisors has during these assessments to raise your value of your property, but not pass that raised amount onto the taxes.
Yeah, that's what John's talking about there. The actual levy amount, which is the taxes paid, depends on the rate that is set. The board will set the rate and it'll determine based upon that new value, it'll determine the amount of taxes you pay. Ideally, you're wanting to get the increased equity in your home from the new values and not pay more taxes, that's a board decision. And I tell people this, look, here's the two questions that you probably want to ask yourself as you're coming in without considering taxation. Does your new value, in your opinion, reflect 100% fair market? And would you sell it for less than that?
Oh, yeah.
Ask yourself those questions. And if you would, then we've probably made an error and we probably need to know the rest of that information.
Okay. Well, everybody, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much. Hope to have you back on here, Doug. Pleasure
Thank
to
you,
have you
John. Thank you,
always,
Heather.
Heather. Appreciate you
Yeah.
coming on.
Have a good one.
Okay,
Thanks. You
thank you.
too.